talk about infrastructure. Very important conversation. Nigeria's infrastructure deficit has been one of the biggest factors holding back Africa's largest economy's growth and development. The value of Nigeria's total infrastructure stock represents only about 35% of GDP, significantly below that of emerging economies' average of 70%, according to the country's debt management office, with the World Economic Forum's 2019 Global Competitiveness Index having ranked Nigeria 116 out of 141 countries. We've got a great guest now joining us from our Abuja studios to discuss this. Dr. George Nwangwu is an international consultant who has provided support to the World Bank and other multilateral institutions in the areas of infrastructure. So we're about to have a very, very important conversation with Dr. Nwangwu. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. First question to you. Many advanced countries prioritize infrastructure due to its potential to accelerate development. Can you tell us the correlation between infrastructure and national growth and development?
Thank you very much. So when we speak of infrastructure, we talk about things like roads, bridges, seaports, airports, ICT infrastructure, broadband networks, telecommunications, so pipelines. These are all infrastructure. And infrastructure is really important to every country's development. In fact, infrastructure enables trade, it powers industries, it connects workers, to their jobs, generally helps in alleviating poverty. So infrastructure is generally an enabler. You reeled out a number of statistics when you started, but I would like to add one more. Infrastructure, it's generally believed that a 1% growth in infrastructure stock leads to a 1% growth in per capita GDP of any country. So it's really, really important. It's the bedrock that on which every other country's economy drives. So it's quite important.
All right. So would you say, based on that, it's prioritized as much as it should with developing nations here in Nigeria and across other developing nations as well?
So, you just gave us statistics that show that the developing nations, even in Africa, a lot of developing nations are in Africa, that their infrastructure stock is very low. There are lots of reasons why this is the case. There is the issue of lack of finance. There's no, these countries lack the kind of financial firepower to develop their infrastructure. You can only raise as much money from taxes, from borrowing. And so you find that governments across board in most of these countries do not have the money to invest in infrastructure. And if you leave that aside and you look at the private sector investment in infrastructure, you would also find that you need to put in the enabling environment to attract private sector to come in and really put their money into in the infrastructure. The developing economies have not been able to do this in a properly or in a sustainable manner. And so you find that there's a lot of money out there, private sector money, multilateral fund money that is ready to come in to invest in infrastructure, but you need to put the necessary structure in place to attract that money or to allow that money come. And so this is the basic reason. This is the basic reason why these countries suffer infrastructure deficit.
Great stuff. Dr. Nwangwu, as you're speaking right now, we've got an image of Lagos State. There's a road, it looks like a grenade fell in the middle of the road. It's slowing down a number of commercial buses that are trying to go through there. Can you speak to maintenance? Because I want to ask you about infrastructure deficits and so on. But what about, there it is. So there are the images there. I mean, look at that road. What would you say about maintaining infrastructure and keeping it, avoiding decay, especially something that we see a lot here in Nigeria?
That's a very good question, because we always talk about investment in infrastructure without talking about the maintenance. Maintenance is a very, very important component. You find that historically, the public sector has been unable to maintain infrastructure in a sustainable manner. One of the major problems that we have in Nigeria is maintenance of infrastructure. And that is why a number of us, we will preach that we should invite private sector investment in infrastructure, not just because the private sector brings in the money that is necessary to develop the infrastructure, but the private sector, if you transfer the risk of maintenance to the private sector, they realize that their money, to make money, to continue to recover their investment, that they need the infrastructure, need to continue maintaining that infrastructure, then they put all their efforts in maintaining that infrastructure. You find that if you look at the budgets, Nigerian budgets, take for instance budgets of the Federal Ministry of Works, that's really the primary agency in charge of infrastructure in Nigeria. You find that a lot of money is dedicated to infrastructure maintenance, but it's hardly done. We wait for the roads to go really bad or the things to really get bad, then we need to completely spend a lot of money to produce the new road, new infrastructure. It's what it is. So it's a big problem. It's a big problem in this in our country.
Great stuff. All right, again, it's Arise Exchange on Arise News. We're speaking with an international infrastructure consultant, Dr. George Nwangwu. Doctor, I want to keep you on. We're going to continue the conversation after the break, so please do stay with us. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to the Arise Exchange on Arise News. We are still speaking with our international infrastructure consultant, Dr. George Nwangwu, who, of course, is with us in our Abuja studios. Doctor, great conversation that we're having here. So I want to ask you again about third world, great to have you, third world countries, especially in Africa, facing infrastructure deficits. I already mentioned finance. If I was to ask you what's the main cause of the infrastructure deficit, would you hang your hat on finance, or are there any other issues to poke at as far as the reason why we have such a deficit here in developing nations?
Thank you very much. When I say finance, there are so many layers to the finance problem. So you find that the way, and finance is the last thing that comes in. Because, like I said, there's a lot of money out there for infrastructure, especially private sector-enabled infrastructure. And you find that beginning from project preparation, how do we prepare our projects? Do we properly prioritize these projects? Do we properly, especially, and so if I was to pick one problem, it'll be project development, from prioritization to doing proper feasibility studies, and then you look at managing risk. So every country has its own unique risk, country risk, and this country risk leads to certain project risk. I'll give you an example. The electric power sector situation in Nigeria, where when people say, always tend to ask, why do we not have private sector investors running in to invest in power? I mean, everybody wants power. We don't have enough. Therefore, private sector people can come in and invest and provide power. And you know, it's not always like that, because you find that you come in, the private sector comes in, or the investor comes in to invest in power, and then realizes that, you know, currency risk. It puts in, say, $100 million, because power is very, very expensive. You put in $100 million, you want to take out dollars, it becomes a problem. We're not able to manage that risk. You have regulatory issues, inconsistent regulations. You have a number of tax issues. You have so many problems, and you will say that, you know, we never took ease of doing business seriously, and I'm glad we're paying attention to it, and I'm glad we're improving, but there's a long way to go. So when you ask, so yes, money is the problem, but there are underlying reasons why the financing is not coming, and they're multifaceted.
Would you add insecurity as an issue? Using an example of Mozambique. Mozambique, Total just abandoned, for now, a $15 billion gas project in Mozambique because of insecurity, although they're getting help from Rwanda with military to try to secure the area. Would that be up there as another risk, country risk, insecurity?
That's a major, major risk. And I would want to, you know, when you talk about insecurity risk, I mean, you can call everything political risk. It's in there with, you know, so the life of the workers. So if you're bringing in money into the country and you're not sure whether your staff would be secure in the first place, you're not sure whether your investment will even continue if you put that money in, and you remember that this money belongs to different funds, different institutions, so people do not want to take risk where it's unnecessary. And you also realize that a lot of countries are competing for these funds. A lot of regions, you know, why America would rather go to South America than come to Africa. There's a reason for that. And so people that want to come, despite the insecurity, will charge a premium for it. And if you notice, a lot of the infrastructure we do in Nigeria comes out a lot more expensive than everywhere else. You know, you always notice people saying, oh, they built this rail track for X amount in this particular country, in Ghana, and build this infrastructure for this same number of kilometers for this amount in Nigeria. But people price in this insecurity, they price it into their... So the few businesses that are willing to come and invest will price this into the cost of infrastructure. So apart from, so it scares, insecurity scares investors away, but it doesn't stop there. The few investors that do come in would basically charge a premium for coming into the country. That's what happens.
Great. Thank you. So very in-depth. We have an estimated $3 trillion infrastructure gap here in Nigeria. The population is growing rapidly. What would you say are Nigeria's critical infrastructure projects that you should focus on going into the next decade for Nigeria?
Okay. So that's another very good question. And so you would think that the world is pivoting towards technology, towards the green economy. And if you notice, we don't seem to be ready for the green economy or for anything. If you see the clamor over the petroleum industry bill, that you would think that oil is the big thing, is the biggest thing in the world right now. But this is not the case. It's the case that a lot of, in countries are looking to invest in technology, looking to invest in electric vehicles, driverless vehicles. They're moving to 5G. They're moving to artificial intelligence. They're moving away from where we are going. We're going in the other direction. And so I think we shouldn't be left behind in the quest for the green economy. So the type of infrastructure that we need to invest in, first we need to invest in infrastructure that will enable trade, sustainable trade. We're going after we just signed up to it. It's going to be very big. How are we going to compete? Do we have the infrastructure to compete? If you bring goods into our port, it costs about 1 million naira to drive to move your container from the port outside of the port. Is that how we're going to compete? We need to invest in climate resilient infrastructure. These things are changing. We need to look at the future. We need to start to diversify our economy. This is our opportunity. We've been a mono economy for a long time. We've depended on oil, and we've built a lot of oil infrastructure to support that. But we're far behind. The race for the green economy has started. We need infrastructure. We need to adapt our infrastructure in a manner that enables us compete in the new green economy. And I'm not sure we're doing that. Everything points to the other direction.
Well, we hope this conversation definitely helps. Dr. George Nwangwu, International Infrastructure Consultant, thank you so much for your time today, sir. And we do wish you a good rest of the week.